Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 91, and we're talking about fire structures. So, we kind of mentioned this last week. We said it would totally be worth a whole other episode. So, here we are. We're doing a whole other episode, and it's on fire structures. And we're talking fire structures. What does that mean to you, Ben? Because this kind of was your idea. So,
it's a bit of it's the structure your fire is either built on or is built around your fires. So what's basically housing, protecting your fire, and I think it's a bit of an underappreciated part of fire making. A lot of people really put a lot of effort into your fire sticks and how you build the fire part itself, but not what it's attached to or how it's protected from the environment or how the environment affects its performance. So you have quite a few things, and just for an example, we can think of the fire ring that everyone thinks of, where you take a bunch of rocks and build a ring and then put your fire inside of it. I mean, that's a pretty basic fire structure that I think most people are pretty familiar with, and some people think is pretty essential to having a fire. Um, but I think it goes to a lot more than that. And I thought that now your winter's coming on. There's a few types of things that you really want to keep in mind, especially if you're not used to winter camping, that you might want to think about. It may help you later on in your summer camping. So I have a child next to me picking at me.
fair enough.
So
No, sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Nope,
No,
I was going
okay.
to. All right,
Go
I
on.
was going to say, I'm pretty much on the same mindset, and you're right. It is a very underappreciated part of making a fire. You mentioned the classic rock ring, and I think that's what everybody thinks, especially when they're getting into the outdoorsy aspect of this and the bushcrafting, camping, whatever. They think classic ring around, slap your fire in there, you're good to go. Realistically, it's not a bad design. Don't get me wrong, but it's not always the design that you could specifically need for the situation you're in. A good many of times, like if I'm doing a lean-to shelter or something like that, it's not a full circle. It's kind of like a crescent moon or a semicircle, and I leave one side facing me open, so it's easier to access from the lean-to shelter or something like that. And I mean, as you said, not a lot of people think of these things when they're going into it. If you kept a full ring around that instance, for example, you would lose a lot of the heat that would be coming through that opening into your shelter, which would be, it could be detrimental this time of year. Well, maybe not tonight. Tonight's almost, what, 15 degrees or something like that. We're living pretty high on the hog. But let's say middle of January when it's like minus 15, minus 20.
Yeah, and there's even the ring design. Your choice of rocks have a huge effect on this. Um, a lot of people think like river rocks, but the reality is rocks that have been soaking in the water are super dangerous. Like if that gets hot enough, they oftentimes explode. Uh, so you really kind of have to choose your rocks somewhat wisely, because the wrong rocks, like I said, can expand, can crack, can explode. I've seen rocks throw some pretty hot pieces of shrapnel quite a ways, and if they get you in the face, or especially the eyes, that can make a trip really bad. So you kind of have to be careful. And but the right application of rocks allows you to put like a frying pan really close to the fire and cook food. It allows a lot of neat little things. You can put a spit across it and cook food on top of a spit. I mean, that structure there helps, but it also helps control and funnel your fire by restricting air to certain sides of the fire. You can make that wood last longer because it's not just burning haphazardly. You're actually controlling the burn a bit better. So all these things play a huge part in in fire making, uh, and and this is definitely one aspect of it. So I agree with you. I've often done the crescent structure, and for me, the crescent structure is a bit safer too, because the rocks that are generally right in front of you aren't there. So if those are the ones that we're ever going to break, it's not so bad, and the ones behind will most likely blow away from you. But if they do come towards you, they could pull part of the fire with you. So you do have to be aware of that. Um,
Random question. Ideal circumstances, what is your favorite setup for, say, a fire pit? Because I do have one in my mind that if I can do it, I really like it.
um, what I've often liked, this may be kind of yours, is actually taking larger logs and building around it, making my ring out of that, lighting my fire inside of it, and just sort of rolling those logs in as I go and keeping some on the outside. That kind of makes some sense because, especially if you have wetter or less ideal wood, those logs on the outside forming your ring or your barrier are then just being dried out by the heat of the fire. So when it comes time to burn them, you can just slide them in. They don't tend to explode or cause any problems, and you can kind of control it with just how close you keep them to the fire. Uh, so that's sort of the one that I'll go to. And then I always have some rather larger pieces of wood to drying and ready for like a later overnight flame if I wanted to keep the fire going for quite a while. How about yourself?
So, yes and no. Mine is a little different. I do like the crescent moon shape or the semicircle. However, it's kind of larger in the back, tapers down to the front, and if I can find a nice big flat stone to kind of go to the back of that crescent, I love it as using it for a heating shelf for things like tea and stuff like that. And then as you come towards the front, that's generally where I put my bigger wood because one, as you said, it'll dry out a little bit. Two, if you do happen to get a river rock with a little bit of an air gap in it and some water and something pops, the wood itself actually catches a little of that shrapnel. You mentioned
Yeah.
about how they can actually pop off and make quite of an explosion. Not really rock, but down in a piece of property we have towards Marigamish, we had an old well crock, which is cement, right? And I was
Yeah.
down there and I was cleaning up some brush and stuff, and I thought, hey, what better place to do this than this old well crock? Because fire can't go anywhere. Yeah, so this was a while ago, a little bit naive. I can see the eyes rolling back and the laughing starting. But yeah, that's exactly what it did. I'm like, it can't go anywhere. It was past fire season. It was after October 15th, but like a lot of our falls are, it was still fairly dry, right? So I was like, I
Yeah.
want to protect it. I had the pond there. I thought this was going to be perfect. Long story short, cement is full of air holes and potential trap moisture and stuff like this. And I think it was a 3.5 or 4 foot well crock. I can't remember. Fairly big well crock. Anyway, it started popping, and I couldn't figure out what this popping sound was, right? I thought maybe some garbage had gotten in there because I did use like a bag of papers I had in the truck to start it. And I was like, crap, is there batteries or something in there? Like, I really started freaking out, only to find out it was the cement popping off. And as you said, it actually popped off with enough force. When it hit me, it hurt like heck.
Oh
And
yeah.
eventually the whole thing popped and the whole well crock broke, and it was a terrible experience. But I, it's, you know what I mean? Just absent-minded, thought, oh hey, it's going to be safe. It's real easy to get the same mindset grabbing rocks from the water, because a lot of people like to set up next to water. The rocks are right there. Generally, you're going to find great rocks for building fire pits next to riverbeds, lake shores, stuff like that. But yeah, you really got to watch yourself on some of that stuff.
Yeah. We used to have a when we bought our cabin, there was a brick fireplace made outside, and it was the same thing. Like we lit a fire in it one day, and I guess it probably sat for a few years and wasn't used, and the bricks really built up quite a bit of moisture in it. And all of a sudden, the bricks themselves were just throwing like handfuls of brick at you. And like I remember the wife really complained about it because it was hitting like her legs. Like she'd sit up there in the shorts, and she'd get these hot things hitting her in the legs. It wasn't a pleasant experience. But I've seen rocks and things do the same. So I do try to avoid a lot of rocks if I don't suspect that they are good, solid rocks that won't really cause a problem. What you're looking for really is hard to like a granite style
I
rock.
was going to
Yeah,
say a good hard metamorphic rock, if anybody
yeah.
knows your different rock types. A good solid metamorphic rock, you tend to be okay with.
Um, so yeah. Um, the other one is, and I haven't got a ton of experience. Is the was it they call it the Dakota hole fire?
A Dakota Fire Pit or the Dakota Fire
Yeah.
Hole or Sandstone works but won't last. Yeah, so Troy just made the comment that sandstone works but won't last.
Yes.
You're completely right. It tends to be porous enough that any steam is what actually pops your rocks. With sandstone, generally the steam can escape, but it does ruin the structural integrity of the stone, as you said. So yeah, sandstone works good in a pinch, especially if you're going to make a quick camp. Works great, easy to set up. It kind of, when you're done, you can just rake it all on top of itself, smother your fire out, and things are good. Long
Yeah.
term, as you said, it'll break down and kind of cause some complications. Uh, I have no idea what I was going to say before that. Anyway, back to you, Ben.
We were talking about Dakota Fire Pits.
Oh yes, Dakota Fire Pit. I've used it a couple times. I actually really like the design. I like the concept. I probably could get better at it, but it's a lot of work that goes into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it
So
potentially can be a lot of work that goes into it.
anyone who doesn't know, it's more or less a U-shaped hole, and you light the fire underneath the ground, and the air gets sucked in one end and exhausts out the other. I guess in a lot of ways, not too far off from the concept of a rocket stove.
You just keep chatting. I'll see if I can bring one up here. Ah, there's
I
a
know
good picture.
one of the touted advantages, especially at night, is it doesn't create a lot of light, so it doesn't sort of give away your position if you're trying to. But it's still, and it's usually pretty clean burning, so there's not a ton of smoke. And you can cook by simply hovering something over the exhaust side of it, and the heat coming up would provide a cooking surface type deal, right? Did you find one?
I did. I'm just trying to bring it up so I don't do this as tactfully as I can. I guess is what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
Um,
Clean up your browser history before it comes up for everyone to see.
Nobody needs to see that. Oh, that didn't work. I'm trying to just open the picture on its own. You can tell I'm getting old. I can't find. Okay, let's try this. There we go. Hopefully this will give everybody kind of a concept of what's going on here. I want the full. I apologize to everybody that's kind of watching this in real time. How do I change this thing? Transition. There we go. So that's kind of the Dakota Fire Pit there. So the idea is you dig two holes with a little trench connecting them, and as you can see there, like it's kind of like the fresh air inlet that you see on the right. The fresh air will come in, it burns it feeds air to the fire, makes it burn very hot, very efficiently. The big thing with the Dakota Fire Pit is you build it from the top down. So all your big stuff goes on the bottom. You're like, instead of, you have your paper, your tinder, your kindling, and all that, and then you build everything on top of it. With Dakota Fire Pit, at least in my experience, you kind of do the reverse. Throw a handful of larger things, not gigantic, but larger things down, then go smaller as you go up and light it, and it'll eventually feed itself down until you got a nice set of coals. And then that fresh air is going to pump air straight in onto those coals, and it creates a really hot and very little smoke, as you had mentioned, to this fire.
Yeah.
So I'll just throw back to us. There we go.
Yeah, so it's a fairly efficient system, and it does save you the trouble of basically trying to basically do a lot of rocks and stuff, I guess. The other one I kind of wanted to bring up with, and I'm pretty sure you'll be pretty knowledgeable on this one, is we used to do a lot of boil ups growing up, and this is where I learned this one. So boil ups, we're going in the woods, usually with a snowmobile, and having a meal in the woods. And if you've ever been, especially somewhere like backwoods Newfoundland, where 6-7 foot of snow is not unheard of, there's lots of firewood available, but when you light a fire, it ends up 7-8 feet below you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It just drops down through the 6 or 7 feet of snow. So, especially if you ended up in a drifted area or somewhere. So what you do is you get 4 or 5 decent sized round logs, say 4 or 5 inch diameter, and you lay them down in a bed form, and then you build your entire fire on top of that. And usually by the time you're finished your meal or something, it hasn't burned through, and your fire will have only radiated enough heat down to melt it down a few inches or a foot or so. So it's basically you're building a raft for your fire to sit on top of. Because if you build your fire on snow, damp ground, or anything else, the ground itself will basically extinguish your fire. That moisture and that coldness will just suck the life and heat out of the fire, which kind of brings you to sort of even the next part. Even, like I said, like for the rest of the year, if you're having trouble building a fire in the summer or the spring or even the fall, part of your problem could just be the land it's sitting on. So if you're sitting on damper soil, you can build a platform and put that fire on top of it. that's drier and more consistent, that'll kind of protect your fire and help it grow better. Once you get it going, you'll pretty well be able to burn on top of anything. But uh, that first step is that raft. So that was kind of what one of the things I wanted to sort of bring up.
No, and it's 100% a great rule of thumb. Like anytime you're going to run in damp ground, not just on the snow, it can be in the woods if there's a lot of peat moss, if the ground's damp. I've always heard them referred to as a platform fire,
Yeah.
um, or at least that's the way it was taught to me, and I use it very frequently. Even I think even when we went camping that time in the by the waterfalls, I threw a couple sticks across the bottom because the ground was damp, just to get that everything raised up and keep it off that dampness. Because as the heat pulls the moisture out, as you said, it turns to steam. I think I can't remember what the expansion is. I think water expands 100 times as it turns to steam or something like that. I'm sure somebody will quote me and give me the correct things down there. As a firefighter, I should know this, but I'm pretty sure it's 100 times, uh, and it's going to take all that heat with it. That's why we use water in the fire service. Like it is excellent at what it does. Removes heat, removes, you know, cools that fuel down, and sometimes can actually give you a little bit of like blockage from oxygen getting in there as the heat passes through and pulls all this. Uh, yeah, sorry, as the water vapor moves through and pulls all the heat along with it. But yeah, platform fires, great thing. Most people, especially starting off, if you're getting used to building fires, you should look at some sort of platform.
1700, buddy.
1700. Well, I was way off, but anyway, yeah, platforms are the way to go, especially if you're getting into starting fires. I don't know if you remember when I did the fire demonstration at the Nova Scotia Bushcraft gathering the last time we were there, and we had it. I think that was last year. Was it year before? Can't remember.
Last year, yes. Yeah.
Anyway, whenever I did that, do you remember when we did the bow drill competition? We moved everything kind of off to a corner where it was shaded in onto the grass.
No.
Well, we did. After I did the demonstration, when I did the demonstration, I had a nice pad out. I laid down a piece of canvas material so I didn't have any of that moisture coming up through the grass. Kind of forgot I did that because I just did it, habitually. And then everybody moved over there, and I didn't think nothing off it. And they called me over, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to do this. Do you want to keep an eye on everybody?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Never even thought of it. Everybody was having such a hard, miserable time trying to get an ember going. But it's because they were putting their like fire cards right on the grass, and that grass still had a ton of moisture because you remember how
Yeah.
humid it was that day.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just killing them. One person got an ember going, and then they had all their tinder and stuff sitting on the ground beside them for so long. It got moisture. Like, I didn't think about it until the day after, or maybe 2 days after, and I was like, oh my God, I should have picked up on that, and I feel so bad. These people work so hard. And I mean, they were sweating profusely. I think it was 40 some odd minutes. Somebody was bow drilling to get this one ember going. Like, people had given up. They were worn out. I think they teamed up on it at points, and it was just a Whittleby humidity. Hot day, very
Yeah.
hot day. It was like 30 some degrees with humidity, or maybe it was even higher than that. It might have been reaching near to the 40s. But I mean, if you see the video of where I did the fire demo and you look at my back, I'm drenched.
Yeah.
It's super hot day, but super humid. And
Yeah.
something as simple as just the humidity in the air, even though it's a hot day, is going to really make it difficult to start a fire with an ember and stuff like that. Now, with that mentality, think about how much moisture comes out of the ground, say in the spring and fall, winter especially, when there's a lot of snow and stuff around. Like, imagine going out and trying to make a fire tonight. It poured rain all day. If you
Yeah.
threw that right on the ground and tried to start it, I don't think you'd get it going with thermite.
No. And that's a big thing. Like anything that steals heat from your fire, um, really does affect it getting going. So even your rocks, like big wet rocks are especially bad, but just big rocks themselves are big heat sinks. So when you're trying to get a fire going with a bunch of heat sinks around, that is stealing a lot of the heat. And that's why a more insulating material as a barrier. So like wood logs and stuff, they're very insulating. They kind of protect that fire. Putting your wood on top of your fire on top of that platform protects your fire. It insulates it from the environment below, both the moisture and the heat stealing properties of these other materials. And that really gives you that extra bit of advantage. Sure, that platform will eventually burn off, but by that time you've built up enough heat in your fire that it's going to be able to overcome those disadvantages that surround your fire. Because once you get a good fire going, it's hard to put out. We all know that too,
Mm.
right? But it's hard to get started if the conditions aren't right. And then when it gets going, it's fairly difficult to stop them. Um,
And that's one of my gripes with the Dakota Fire Pit that I was going to circle back to, but good segue. The Dakota Fire Pit has a lot of advantages. The two big advantage or disadvantages that I see: if the ground
yeah.
is exceptionally wet or exceptionally dry, you're into problems. If it's
Oh yeah.
exceptionally wet, you're not gonna like you're gonna work to get that fire going. And if it's exceptionally dry, especially in a lot of the areas around where I'm at, you get a lot of spruce roots, things like that that extend on forever. You could literally have a fire travel underground and pop back up somewhere else, and now you're on the hook for other things. Because I mean, I have heard of a lot of people try and circumvent the fire ban laws using
Mm.
Dakota fire pits. Not really the best way to do things because, yeah, they may not see the smoke, it's burning efficiently, very little sparks if you're using the right type of wood. All those things seem really great, except you just threw fire in the ground. And normally, when there's fire bans on, and we do have a guest coming on later on, not tonight, but in a future show that's going to talk a little bit about the fire sciences. You're literally throwing all this heat down in the ground, and if it hits some roots, I mean, look at Porter's Lake Fire that happened back in 2012. Some of
Yeah.
the more recent ones, like out, I think Porter's Lake again, Candy Mountain, Spryfield, stuff like that. A lot of fires traveled underground. Smoke popped up days later, and they had to
Yeah.
dig them out, and this is what causes a lot of problems. There have been forest fires, small ones started by campers thinking they extinguished their fire correctly, and it wasn't the surface that recaught everything on fire. There had been roots and stuff underneath, and it traveled and it popped up into some, fine tinders like grasses and stuff that were around them, and off it went again. So that's my big drawbacks with the Dakota Fire Pit. There is a time and a place. Don't get me wrong. You just have to think a little bit more if you're going to implement something like that.
So my understanding, and I may be wrong on this one, but like an underground fire can last days, weeks, even months,
If
if
not
not longer.
years, I mean, I can't remember where it is. There's coal fires still burning somewhere. I can't remember. And it's been years. Don't get me wrong. Normally, a campfire is not going to start off a coal fire. But in
No.
whatever instance this was, fire got into a vein of coal and it's still burning. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I didn't prepare for it, didn't look it up. But yeah, I mean, it's been years burning. Sawdust piles. There's sawdust pile. I'm thinking there's a mill. I'm not going to say the name because I don't know what their feelings would be on it. But there's a mill down from where I'm from. If anybody knows the area, they'll know the one. They had got fires started in one of their sawdust piles. And
Yeah.
I know for sure it was months later, if not years later, when they got digging in there, they found smoke and hot spots again.
I believe that. Uh, Sort of the opposite, but the same idea, like the insulating qualities of sawdust. You can find ice inside of sawdust piles from years ago.
Oh, for sure. That's how original fridges or cold
Icebox.
rooms were made. Icebox, that's what I was looking for. You would go cut river or lake ice, drag it back to your settlement, dwelling, whatever the case may be, during the winter, and then you just
Yeah.
shovel some sawdust and stuff on it, and that's how you would keep stuff cold through the warmer months. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, it would be in a root cellar system. You'd be 4 feet underground, below the frost line, stabilized temperature, yada yada, all that good stuff. But the basic principle was the sawdust acted as an insulator.
Yeah. No. Um, Definitely something to keep in mind when you're thinking about those things. So, like, if you're right, like, if the fire does get underground, it can smolder under there for long periods of time, and then just flare up later when the conditions are just right. And it's
No, Danny just actually pointed out the fire I was actually thinking of. It's the Centrilla Mine fire. It's a coal seam that had been burning underneath Pennsylvania, U.S. since May 27th, 1962.
wow,
So
it's
that's
been
still
burning
going.
my head.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's all I had to say about that. I don't want to derail us too much there. But yeah,
Yeah,
so your different fire setups, platforms, things like that all play a big part in, or should play a big part in trying to eliminate stuff like that. You should always be thinking about the what ifs. Don't you know what I mean? I don't mean to scare anybody or anything like that. That's not the purpose. Don't misunderstand. It's just you have to be a little bit more cognitive. And that's where a lot of these fire appliances and fire platforms and things like that come into play. They can help you. Holy crap. Danny said at its current rate, it could continue to burn for over 250 years.
Wow.
He Googled it. Thanks.
Thanks, Google.
Thanks,
And Dan.
Danny, for using Google. But yeah, so that's all stuff you got to think about. So I guess in short, everything we've been talking about is the perfect little ring. Not always your best method because it does protect you around, but it doesn't protect you underneath from above. Not always the best protection from wind either. Because a lot
No.
of people hagger these things together, and there's like gaps the size of your fist that air can just blow through or sparks can blow out, whichever way you want to look at it.
So the logical segue to this, and it's still part of the fire structure, is quote unquote your reflector wall.
And that's where the last week's topic
Yeah.
kind of came into this that I mentioned. We talked about reflector walls, and I said good, bad, or otherwise what they do. It's a whole other show, and in this, I thought this was a perfect episode to talk about reflector walls. So, what's your
Yes.
thoughts on reflectors walls, there, Ben? Because you know mine, and I can go off for a long time. So I'll try and keep my side short on this.
Although I've seen people try some neat tricks that I think does have some functional fact. The people taking like the tin foil and putting it on the wall to sort of reflect. I know 100% it reflects more light, and I truly believe it does reflect some radiant heat towards you. So I do believe when you do that, it does do that. Uh, General tests saying whether you have just a fire in the open without a back wall uh, doesn't actually put more heat towards you, and maybe that's true in some ways, but it does keep wind and stuff from blowing the smoke at you. It does protect the fire from the wind. So I 100% believe that. And I think too, anytime you have walls around, it traps that warm air in with you. So if you have a wall behind and maybe a couple that are angled towards you, so you're making a bit of a C shape towards you or U shape towards you, and then you got a structure behind you, that air inside is going to stay warmer. I guarantee you that if you walk out around that wall anywhere, it's significantly colder out there than it is inside that walled area. So I think there's definitely a few things. It does protect against wind, and it does trap some heated air. I mean, a lot of it's going up. It's not going to last very long, but it does trap some warmth within in the confines of your structure, I would say. Uh,
And that's 100% my thoughts. So you managed to narrow down an incredibly long ramble that I can go on because reflective walls have always been my pet peeve. Because don't misunderstand, I don't dislike reflector walls. I think they're a great thing. I don't like the fact they're called reflector walls because heat doesn't reflect off a surface like wood. It absorbs. Heat transfers through radiation, conduction, and convection,
yeah,
not so much by reflection. However, like you said, if they put the mylar and stuff on there, you'll get some thermal radial heat coming off that, but then it gets into the argument, is it actually reflecting the heat of the fire? But, you know, everybody is free to go do their research and make their own decision on that because it's super interesting when it comes down to fire science, but it's also very long and potentially arduous process to look all this stuff up. So I strongly recommend anybody that's been wondering about reflective walls, go and do some research. You're going to learn a ton, but as Ben said, my belief anyway, they don't reflect so much heat as they trap the heat next to you. They break the wind from being able to blow your heat away. And the big thing I get with a reflective wall or reflector, whatever you want to call it, is the additional light that it seems to have. I don't know if it's because it reflects any more light in, which I don't think. I think it's because it cuts off the voiding darkness behind you to make it seem like you have more light in. It may be nothing more than a psychological game, but I do feel cozier, warmer, and safer with a reflective wall up if I'm like deep woods camping. And I have some sort of like temporary shelter set up that I'm hunkering down in for a few days.
the other nice thing with a reflector wall too is you have say 7 or 8 logs stacked on top of each other and a fire lit in front of it. So that's basically drawing that wall. So you can always pull a few off that and put a couple of wet ones back up there. And oftentimes, if I've ever done it, it's always I've taken advantage of that ability. So as the night goes on and I need some more wood, I'll take a few pieces off that because I know they're dried out now and will burn, right? Because they do absorb some of that heat. Because wood's a thermal mass. There's a reason a log cabin actually has a thermal efficiency similar to an R2000 home, even though their insulation value is less than say the R30 or R40 that a R2000 home would have, or whatever the way you put it. And the reason is it holds a thermal mass that just releases that heat back within the house over time, where your gyprock wall insulates, but that doesn't really have a thermal mass that it radiates with inside your house as the ignition source goes down. Um, I did witness this a lot in my basement. My basement has a few unfinished walls. If I had a good fire going, that room stays warm for a couple of days after. Really, it does. Like there's residual heat. The opposite's true too. If I don't have a fire going for a few days and the wall gets cold, it takes a lot of time to get that room back to warmth because the first fair amount of heat goes right into trying to keep that uninsulated wall warm again.
No, 100%. I was just looking at Danny's comments here. The reflector walls, they look cool in Instagram pics. And then he said, we always build one when winter camping, dousing it with snow to keep it from burning. Now, a trick, oh, yeah. But a trick I do, much like what you said, is if you build it up, what I like to do is just before I go to bed, change the logs out. The ones that were there now become my nighttime fuel because they have been doing all that pre-drying and stuff. And they'll burn quite good, quite well. You throw some fresh ones up, they're going to be a little bit more wet, hopefully not cause you any problems over the night. Now, if you are scorching your reflector wall that much, you may want to build it a little bit more back. I don't build mine right on top of my fire. I don't know what your feelings are on this. I actually build mine back enough that the radiating heat shouldn't be able to ignite it under normal circumstances until, a substantial amount of time have gone by. I don't, once again, personal beliefs, I don't think it needs to be directly on top of the fire to serve its purpose. I try to leave enough room that if I had to, I could walk between the fire and the wall. I mean, I wouldn't want to hang out there, but I could
No,
actually, sidestep through it or do whatever needs to be done.
you're looking to have probably 12 to 18 inches between the fire and the wall itself. So you said if you had to get back there, or some reason something fell in there, you don't want a log rolling off the fire and igniting your wall, and all of a sudden you have a much bigger fire than you planned. Um, if that makes a lot of sense. So just trying to keep your fire, because most times if you've got a decent little shelter set up, if you got that, you don't need a huge fire to keep yourself relatively warm
No.
and cool. A lot of us, myself, a horrible instigator of this, horrible abuser, but have a fire much bigger than we really need it.
Mm. I'm
And
guilty of that myself.
that's because I think we're all pyromaniacs at heart.
I can't
Right?
argue that. I definitely am.
Yeah. But no, it's a lot to think about. But I think giving some thought anytime you're having a fire, giving a thought to the structure that surrounds your fire, that's housing your fire, protecting your fire, and really is an integral part of the whole fire in itself, even though it's not technically the fire, will really up your fire game a lot. And so far, we've talked about almost everything natural, but there are man-made items that you can bring, and the one that we've mentioned past, but I'll just throw it up there now, is the fireball. The
Yeah.
fireball kind of gives you the lay and the walls, the confines in one item. And the beauty of it is you can pick it up and toss it in the lake and put your fire out and not have any damage to the land. No real evidence you've been there. Um, so that's kind of an advantage there. The disadvantage is just the bulk it takes up. But honestly, it's not a lot of physical volume or weight to take a thin steel wall.
No, I think after a few times of trying it, you would really figure it out because, as you said, not heavy. It's the awkward size. You know what I mean? That domed thing. But if you could figure out how to pack the materials into it so it leveled out, it really wouldn't take that much.
No, Yeah, you can definitely like pack, say, a sleeping bag within the confines and stick some stuff on the outside. And if you're not a big proponent of having everything packed in its own individual bag so it's quick to get, because that I see that, I do that myself. But if you just poke things in, then stuff can get in and around it quite well.
Mm.
Just when you go to open it up, it's just stuff. So it's the neat and tidiness is definitely gone. But yeah, no, it's fireball's not a bad method. It's something that really captures most of the elements to a proper fire uh, structure, for lack of a better word. I mean, that's what we're calling them, but fire structures, anything that's basically under, around, or even over your fire to help control and enhance its abilities. Uh, we call that a good description there.
I believe that's an excellent description of kind of what we've been chatting about here tonight. And I really would like to give the Fireball a thorough chance. I remember the first time that you talked about it, it was way back at the start of our podcast. I
Yeah.
kind of laughed a little, but then the more I got thinking about it, the more I'm like, you know what? You're definitely onto something. There's a lot of pluses to this thing. You know what I mean?
I can guarantee you go to almost any Value Village thrift store, you can pick up a stainless steel bowl for $2-3
Oh, for sure.
day in day. I can see
I mean, to
all
go
day.
buy one new, they're not ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
To be fair, I haven't priced any in a few years, but they never were ridiculously expensive. As long as it's stainless steel, it'll hold quite a bit of heat before it deteriorates. The better the steel, the more you're gonna, more you're gonna get out of it. I wouldn't suggest taking, though better than nothing. A dollar store steel bowl may break down with some of the fires that I've had.
Maybe. I think it lasts quite a while. I just don't suggest taking your wife's favorite, bread bowl
Mm.
and going out and doing it, because that'll probably end up with a broken finger or something down the road. But definitely something to play with, something to consider.
I never
Uh,
even thought about getting them there.
where
I know we're not going to get monetized. So, Old Bastard Outdoors loves the Fireball idea, especially if doing low trace. So, Pennsylvania sells them in cattle feed stores.
Oh yeah,
So, yeah, I never thought about that, but I imagine the cattle feed store down here, if I went in and looked, they'd have something. They probably wouldn't call it, stainless steel bowl. They'd probably call it like stainless steel cattle feed. But I'm sure they'd probably have something similar, and it would be probably a little bigger than you get in the baking section at, say, like, Walmart or something like that.
yeah. Well, there's a farmers co-op within a couple 100 feet of my house, so I could go over and see what they have there. I'm sure they have stainless steel bowls. Princess Auto always seems to have stuff like that too.
Yeah, they have the oddest things for an auto spot. Not cheap. You mean from the feed store there, Troy? Or like I said, I've literally never thought about going into a feed store to look for one. But at the same time, if it's a fairly big bowl, a one-time
Yeah.
purchase, I mean, I've spent a lot of money on other things. You know what
Well,
I mean?
and if you think about it, with the feed bowls, as opposed to say
Oh,
your
Princess
your
Auto.
mixing bowls, the mixing bowls are a nice parabola, which would focus heat to the center pretty nice, but really it's kind of awkward to pack and carry. Where a feed bowl, more like a dog bowl, which at the dollar store would be a good option, has relatively steep sides and they're not so high. They may actually be and a flatter bottom, so they may be a little bit more convenient to both pack and use. So there's definitely different options out there for stainless steel bowl container type things that you could light a fire in. In a pinch, you could even get away with like a more tinfoil system, but chances are it won't survive the whole fire. It'll get it going, but at the end, you're just going to find your tinfoil one is missing.
Yeah, so
Uh,
PA, my mistake. Everybody that's listening, I thought that was for Pennsylvania. It's not. They do mean Princess Auto.
Princess Auto, yeah. Yeah, Princess Auto always has stuff like that for
They have
sure.
knit. They have. I say weird stuff, but they have such selection of everything. I love going to Princess Auto, man. You can find stuff in there to do bushcrafting things that it was never intended to do, but it
Oh
works
yeah,
so well for so little money. Usually,
well, that's my favorite thing to always, and I think it's why people in stores hate to see me come, because when I walk into a store and I'm looking for something, I'm looking to see how I can make something that wasn't meant to do something do what I want it to do. where most people go in and say, I want nails. And they're like, okay, these are nails. And so why do you want nails? And I'm like, I'm going to make a knife out, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. It's never what it was intended for. So dollar store is a big one for that too. You can walk through dollar store and find a ton of interesting and cool things. Just don't go in there with a set idea that when you're going, you want this to do that. I like to go in there saying, what could I do with that? Or is that the best use of that particular product? Princess Auto, like you say, often have weird products and stuff.
But weird is good. I mean, we're
yeah.
weird people. Bushcrafters in general, we're different types of people.
I thought I was normal.
We're normal to ourselves. I mean, we don't normally fit into the generalized concept of society, I don't think, because we're running away from it. But so Troy mentions that old washer machine drums make good burn pits, and 100% right. I know lots of people that use those in their backyards and stuff. The only downside, once again, they're big and heavy.
They don't fit the pack well.
I mean, you could wear one as a hat with a lot of straps and stuff, but I mean, no, it's a real classic, honestly. The other one is like the old drum barrels. You see a lot of those, tops cut off. I mean, for backyard burning, old culverts, if you can find one of those. Somebody throwing away a couple of those. Like, I think it was a 3-foot culvert we found once. Somebody was ripping up some stuff, and we managed to cut, a 2-foot chunk out of this thing. Man, what a fire pit that made for a while. Don't know how I feel about the galvanizing burning off it, but it was great.
I was out hiking the other day, and I came across a bunch. I damn near stole them. There was these black barrels that were a little over probably a foot in diameter, and probably about 3 foot long. I don't know what was in them. They looked empty, just sitting on the side of the road. They would have made a great little fire. I thought they'd make a good little stove. Honestly, is why I sized them up.
Well, Danny Swan here was just saying he has an old stock pot that he drilled some holes near the bottom and used it for a small portable fire pit. That's actually not a bad idea either.
No.
So, lots of things out there once you get your mind thinking about it, right?
Yeah, there is. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the options are quite great. Honestly, you'd be surprised what you can do with the old, like the inside chimney pipes too. Things like that. It's nice flat steel you can fold out and make all kinds of things. But yeah, anything that can sort of contain your fire would be a great idea. And if you can get something that fits your pack well, I mean, you could do one on a cookie sheet if you wanted. In fact, if you think of outdoor fire stoves, I mean, I've made the ammo cam one, and me and you got a couple of project ones on the go.
We're gonna get back to that too.
We do. I keep kicking it every time I go down to the basement.
Worst part is it's so close. We just got to sit down and do it.
Yeah. But things like that, a lot of people actually carry an extra sheet just to put down and put their stove on top of that so that it doesn't melt down into the ground. Like it kind of floats. It keeps it level and flat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's...
Sorry.
That's what you say. There's tons of things you can do out there. I think we've covered this topic adequately well. I mean, there's always more you can say with these things.
Oh, for sure. But I think we're going to start, as we're starting to do now, we're going to start, looping back to old topics. So in the hopes of keeping it shorter and informative, more than long-winded and maybe rambly, because I am very good at that.
Yeah. I mean, we want to ramble. I got a couple of subjects we can just toss out there.
Oh, man. We can ramble. We got to get the digital campfire going, bud. We got to do it. But anyway, for the sake of this video, I think we kind of covered this fairly well. We talked about a lot of things. Hopefully, we got the juices flowing for anybody that's out there. If you want... Sorry?
You say Sean's on here? Sean's on here? Old Bastard Outdoors?
Yep.
Is he still there?
Sure is.
He'd be good on the campfire.
I was going to say, once we get the digital campfire going, let's just have an open mic, basically. Dial in, and if you can get your voice in there, get out of here kind of deal. But We really got to talk to the other people involved in that and get that sucker going. That would be a great like once a month dealio. You know what I mean? What's your guys' thoughts? We've talked about this in the past. Is that something you guys would be interested in out there? So the digital campfire idea was literally just that. Like a bunch of us that do bushcrafting, fishing, outdoorsy stuff. We're just gonna jam into one giant jumbled kind of group chat and pick a topic for the night and probably not cover anything about that topic. We'll just keep circling around other things. But the best fire is the one your buddies build, Ben. But yeah, so what's your guys' thought? That's something we've been tossing around. We keep bringing it up. If it's something you guys want to see, we can definitely get more motivated to make that happen. I don't think it'd be overly difficult. It may not have the same nicety format this does with the fancy background and things like that, but we can definitely make it happen in a very low-tech, high chatty kind of way. I think is what it would ultimately come out to be. But yeah, I'd be up for a group chat thing. Sweet. So maybe we'll reapproach that and we'll chat about that a little bit more in the future. You're kind of getting choppy there, Ben. I don't know if that's... My side still seems to be good, so I don't know if it's your side or what's going on there, bud. Can you still hear us? You still chatting in with us? Okay, I don't think Ben is chatting in with us. There he comes. He's back.
I'm
Ben
here.
is back.
I'm here.
Okay.
I did lose. I
Can't blame me on this one, Ben. My connection's still great,
it's a
bud.
big time.
All right. I think before we run into too many more technical difficulties, that's a little better face to freeze on anyway. Let's say goodnight for tonight. And yeah, I'm definitely thinking that the digital campfire should be a thing. Maybe I'll get some sort of looped GIF for a campfire and we'll make this hilarious. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Just Old Bastard Outdoors, Troy, Danny, anybody else that I might have missed in there? I think that was it. Though you're not all talking, because I do see we have 8 to 9 people sitting there and only 3 have chatted. Tisk, ladies and gentlemen. Come for the live shows. Enjoy the chat with us. But we'll definitely see you next week. We'll have another great topic for you. And get out there, have fun, play safe. Have a good night, everybody.
Night out.
Oh, he's back. Have a good night.
It's like